Hi, how are you? So today we are going back to the Celestine Prophecy. Last time we left off on the third insight where he was discovering how to see energy.
Yep.
He was just leaving the research center. I don't know how much of that we actually described. We probably should have looked at that.
Well, I mean, I think we described enough as far as like him seeing Marjorie again and experiencing the potential of the fourth insight.
Yes, and one of the last few things that happened at the end of that, it's not really a chapter, I don't think, but at the end of that segment was that he saw one of his, I think her name was Sarah, start to argue with the people that had assaulted the research facility, start to, like, their energy was almost plucking at each other, and when he tried to ask her about it, she didn't know what was going on.
Well, actually, he didn't have time to ask her because they were still arguing. They left.
No, he did talk to them about it a little bit.
Oh.
Yep, he talked to, it was Sarah and a guy whose name I don't remember.
Oh.
Yep, and he tried to talk to them about it a little bit before he left, but both of them gave him confused looks.
They didn't know what he was talking about.
So then his tour guide, Will, was like, I'm not surprised they stopped at the third insight. You already are on your way to the fourth. So here we are on the fourth insight.
Ta-da!
Yep, and then because I don't think there's quite a lot to talk about for this one, I kind of also wanted to bring the fifth insight into play a little bit.
And there's a lot to talk about the fifth one.
Kind of. It depends on where your understanding is already at, as far as I'm concerned.
I guess.
Yeah, so no, Kyra and I are fortunate enough to already have a certain level of understanding of what spirituality is supposed to feel like. Maybe not from our own experiences, but from the literature and from the people around us that talk about those kind of things. Yeah. All right.
So you want to start with the fourth insight?
Yeah. So what I have written down, these are my little summaries. Memorize that or remember that. I also. Oh no! Before we do that, Kyra made a note last time where she said she wanted to look up the genre of the book. I looked it up. It is considered religious fiction.
Okay.
And then I just want to remind you guys that what we're reading from are my notes on the book and not how the book actually describes the insight. So there could be some mistranslations. All that being said, there is a link to the book in the description.
And always be aware that everyone has interpretations. Even when you read something and you think that you're relaying it directly, even if you do it word for word, somebody else is still going to interpret it differently.
Completely differently. So yeah, that's part of why this is a little fun, because I think Kyra and I definitely interpreted the fifth one slightly differently. So it's going to be fun to talk about. Okay, so setting the scene for the fourth insight. They are leaving the research facility because the government and some other people were angry that they're studying the manuscript and they're trying to come after them. And they heard that people...
That's not what the fourth insight.
No. I'm getting there. So they're leaving the research facility and they go into the mountains. And they pass someone, I think, on the road. And they see that his car has a flat tire. So they decide to stop and help him. And then it just so happens that he's technically studying the fourth insight on his own, completely unaware of what it actually is, because I don't think he's on the manuscript journey.
No, he wasn't on a manuscript journey. He was actually, here's the funny thing. I love words. So the scene is that Will told him to be aware of coincidences and always be honest with him about what he sees and stuff like that, because they weren't going to stop. Although the main character was like, that guy seems familiar. He reminds me of somebody in the past. But he was just purely going to let it, just slide, even though that went specifically against what Will told him to. And for some reason, they end up stopping. He was like, yeah, he kind of seemed familiar anyway. He was like, well, you should have told me. So they turned around, they stopped, and they went and helped him out. His water pump was out.
Oh, his water pump. Okay. Yeah. Yep, Kyra's actually read this a lot more recently than I have at this point. I think I read it in October of 2020. No, it's okay. I was bored as hell at work, and fortunately, the job that I have is both spiritual and very lax. So I had enough time to sit and chug through it in like a week. Or like a week's worth of time, so maybe like 7 different days while I was there. But yeah, anyway, point being, so I don't remember the details as well as she does, but that's okay. I have the general gist. One of the things that was very fascinating to me was how they chose to convey the principle of this theory the first time. So they picked this guy up and they all decide to go out to eat, and I'm not sure.
No, that's not what happened.
No?
So they are trying to figure out how to help him get his water pump fixed. And they can't get the part till the next day. So they find a place that's right where his car is stuck. There's a like, I forget what it's called. Like, it's like a camping site. Yeah. And they actually have to camp outside, but they can go inside to eat. The host allowed them to eat there and stuff like that. So they go there, and
the host is a family. It's a host family. Yep.
Right. And do you want me to go and explain?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're in there, and at this point, the main character and Will don't know that this guy is studying the fourth insight. They just know that there's some type of coincidence with this guy, and they're open to figuring out what it is. Well, more so his interaction with the main character as opposed to Will. Will is just kind of like an aid.
Yeah, he's more like a
guide.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's like an angel, where he's like, okay, this is the next road marker. You figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're trying to focus on figuring that out, and it kind of seemed like it's pointless because they don't really have anything coming. They're not really talking about anything, and they go to eat. And there's this family, and the only person that actually speaks English is the guy, the husband. And he and his wife are basically, they're like toxic.
Yeah, they're having the daughter do most of the heavy lifting, like bring the food to the table, pour the water, etc., like just as examples.
They're using her as a servant,
as basically a pack mule. Yeah.
And she literally, she accidentally spills some water or something, and the dad goes off. He's like, "Are you stupid?" All this stuff is going on.
Running off at the mouth. The mom joins in. They're just berating her, and
you can literally see her go down and down, because she immediately started apologizing like somebody was gonna hit her. When she accidentally spilled the water on the main character, and he's like, "Oh no, it's fine. It was an accident." And I think it was possibly his fault. Like, he may have accidentally bumped into her
or something like that.
And he was like, "It's perfectly fine. It was an accident. It's not a big deal." Then they're telling her like, "You're stupid. You did this wrong. It was all blown out of proportion."
And then she fucking snaps. And so here, actually, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to take this time to read out what I have about the fourth insight. It's how humans compete for energy. Because we are disconnected from the truest source of energy in the universe, we seek it from one another, causing most conflicts. So because they're stealing her energy by being so negative at her, she finally had enough of being drained and snapped back at them. And unfortunately, I can't get too much into it. That does lead to another one of the insights. I can't. Okay, Kyra's gonna have to pick it up from that point. I did want to read. I have a quote from page 66 from the copy that I have. Yet we could also see that we have been disconnected from the larger source of this energy, that we have cut ourselves off, and so have felt weak and insecure and lacking. So think about how disconnected the parents had to be to do some shit like that to their own child. You get what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For me, the first thing that came to mind, like when they were explaining more, the more I was reading more into the fourth insight, and how it's literally you're taking someone else's energy, because what happens is it's not just competing where you see like the different force fields, like in Avatar or something, where he's taking
like the last scene with Ozai. Yeah, man.
That is like when they were competing for it. But in the end, where Aang actually took over, is basically how it explains the rest of the insight being, as far as draining their energy to the point where it fuses with yours. And so you basically kind of, like, in my interpretation, lose a sense of self and become their energy, and you feed into it. So, and the reason I brought that is because of the book, but the reason that was so impactful for me was because I was in a negative situation like that. And I would have wholeheartedly denied it maybe even like a month ago. And definitely when I was in a situation, it was with my mom. And literally was like the constant, there's different ways. It's not just berating, but it can be instilling fear. It can be making you just I don't know, feel sad. There's different ways to do it, and sometimes most time people do it unconsciously.
I'm gonna have to stop you from going too far down that path, because that is the sixth insight.
Well, no, I haven't read it.
I know, but the thought path that you're going down is a little more in line with that one.
Okay, well, I do want to mention. I do want to mention one other example that they had in the book. Kind of skipping a little forward towards the end, they meet this other guy, who is also looking into the insight, or looking into finding more about the insights or the manuscript, and he accidentally makes the main character experience the fourth insight. So throughout the whole chapter or the whole section, Will is telling him, you don't really understand the fourth insight until you experience it. And literally, he went from being more confident and adventurous about, oh yeah, I want to know more, to this guy telling him, oh, you know what, that might not be quite safe. I can help you find a place to go back home, or find a safe way to go back home. Are you sure you want to do this? We can find a place for you inside my camp to help us,
Was this the guy trying to lead the expedition?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I thought that was so much later. That's wild. Okay.
And he's like, we could do it that way. And then immediately he started feeling the same fear that he felt when he first started this whole journey. Like, he hadn't felt that in, I guess, chapters, quote unquote.
It was in days at that point, yeah.
Maybe like a week. He hadn't felt that type of fear of just trying to get away until
like
that
terror,
guy. And it literally, not only does it drain you, it drains your mental capacity to think for yourself, where you start following the other person. And that's what Will had explained to him when he broke free from it. He was Will basically came in and saved him. He was like, okay, it's time to go. And he left the choice up to the main character. But he said, for a minute, I thought that you weren't going to do it, because he really had you wrapped.
He had you snared. And part of the reason, I think, wasn't it because of Marjorie?
Well, he went there to help Marjorie. Because,
they met in a restaurant.
Right.
Yeah.
So they met up. It was so funny, because they almost, like, right at the end of the third insight, Will is telling him, you and Marjorie have unfinished business. That's how the end of the third insight ended. And like halfway through the fourth insight, they meet up again. And this is right after
second time out.
Right. And this is after the incident with the we kind of really skipped over that with the familiar researcher who was searching up who was experiencing or searching up the fourth insight unconsciously. That was based on his work, though.
A little later.
Yeah, so backtracking, Kyra had a good segue. We figured we might as well just go back to I don't know why I said it like that. Anyway, to just backtrack a little bit to the familiar scientist guy, part of why he was important for the main character at that time was to convey a more scientific understanding. My cat's eating. Yay. You done? Okay. Alright, but yeah, part of why he was in there was to introduce a more scientific aspect of it. So he was even talking about what leads people to go to war. He was talking about research. I'm not exactly familiar with what his specific example was, but he saw something that aligned with Will's experience of seeing Sarah and the other person's energy kind of like plucking at each other. You know what I'm saying? As if they were trying to steal a piece of each other's energy by winning the argument.
That's exactly what he was talking about. He was like, literally, we fight each other for control. And he said, why is human nature or humankind like that? And he wanted a better understanding of that. He was like, that's the reason that we have wars. Realistically, we should be able to talk everything out, but because we're trying to express our dominance on each other. And actually, he was the one who pointed out what was going on with the family that they were that was housing them. And he was like, did you see how down the daughter got and further got the more that they talked? He was like, that's just what that is. And we compete.
And even think about, people have started to, like, people around our age, Kyra and I are in our mid-20s, but people around our age even have an example of when everybody in the group is talking, but one person in the group gets overshadowed. That is denying them the energy exchange of the conversation. That's why people who are, and I feel like, I've heard myths about like indigo children and shit like that. I don't necessarily believe in that specifically, but I do believe there are more people who are energetically sensitive, who are paying attention to those people who need more energy during the conversation. And that's part of why this was so fascinating to me, because I remember being the person to be like, what were you saying? Fuck everybody else, I'll listen to what you had to say. You know what I'm saying? Shit like that.
And actually, I used to do that.
I was gonna say, I feel like that's part of why Kyra and I were drawn to each other, because we were closer to the same age, and I feel like had more of an understanding of the energy dynamics going on in the Unity on campus to some extent. Because I will say, we've talked about this in another way, but unfortunately Kyra also had a more negative energy experience that led me away from her for a little bit of time.
Yeah, I was toxic.
Not intentionally. I feel like toxic to me means that you were doing it on purpose. You were more so,
I was in a bad place.
Yeah, but again, I still feel like toxic is specifically for people who are gaslighting, narcissistic, like intentionally hurting people. You weren't doing anything like that. Her energy was just so heavy, it was pulling a lot of people down with her. And again, she was not doing that on purpose, but she needed energy because her circumstances were pulling her down.
Yeah. Ooh.
And it sounds bad. She hates when she has to think about stuff like that, because she makes herself feel guilty about it. I think
I do feel guilty about it, because I don't ever want to be somebody where I'm taking from other people.
But you weren't doing it on purpose, and as soon as it was brought to your attention, you did something to correct it.
I know, but damn,
Give yourself
I did
credit
it in the first place.
But I'm dead.
It was
man.
just,
all right. That's right.
It's I like being a good person, quote unquote, and maybe that's pride, but I'd never wanted to be somebody where I'm taking something from other people, and I don't like to bring other people down, because I got so used to bringing people up or being a positive
giving
energy.
away your energy.
Yeah. Well, I was doing that, didn't know I was doing that either. But being a positive influence, that when I became negative, I didn't notice it, but I just had so much other stuff going on that it was just like, it just happened.
That's what I'm saying. You weren't doing it on purpose. There are people, like someone we both know, who go out of their way to open conversations, and it is very apparent that the conversation is self-serving. It is not for the benefit of the people involved. It's not to learn other people's opinions. It's to talk.
Yeah.
And
that's about as far as we'll go with
yes.
that one. And actually, there's another person that we know that's like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, we had to make faces.
Yeah, we had a little sidebar.
Telepathy.
There's quite a few people we know that are specifically like that. But again, most of these people are not doing it. They're not conscious of the fact that they're stealing energy. They're just doing it because that's what makes them feel good.
And that's the reason that a lot of people do it, is to make them feel good, because we otherwise feel drained and empty. We need to pull energy from somewhere, so then we unconsciously pull it from the people that's around us. Now there are people who will just give it,
but those are people pleasers. You don't want to be like that. No. There's a healthy way to give energy to other people, but we'll discuss that in one of the beefiest insights, which I honest to God think might take up 2 episodes.
Okay, that's fair.
Yep. So to cap off, I'm going to finish the rest of the quote from page 66. In the face of this deficit, we humans have always sought to increase our personal energy in the only manner we've known, by seeking to psychologically steal it from others, in an unconscious competition that underlies all human conflict in the world. So yeah, basically exactly what we talked about, right? Sit on that for a second. For those of you who are spiritual and who tend to watch our podcast, I want you to think about when you feel yourself getting cold all of a sudden, or when you feel yourself getting hot all of a sudden. To me, those are energy experiences. And there have even been times where I have to remember to ground myself, or I have to be like, Kyra, real quick, you're pulling too much, or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
She even has told me that I had to suck my energy back in because I was giving too much.
You were pushing out too much. And that's because that's what was familiar for you to facilitate a good mood. But we'll get into some positive ways to do that. I'm very excited to talk about that insight.
Before we get into that, there is one other thing I wanted to mention. As far as like it making you feel drained, there was a period of time where I couldn't remember why I was just always so tired. Literally, it will leave you exhausted, and you think that maybe you have other health stuff going on.
It could be depression or something like that.
And you think that, and it's literally because your energy is literally just being taken from you.
You're giving energy to things that aren't replenishing you. Here's an actual small, like, family example. I've heard plenty of people say this. If your cup is half empty and you're pouring into someone else's cup, what does that leave you with? I think we've even talked about that on the podcast before. On a, like, people...
A relationship level.
I was going to say, people understand the concept on a fundamental level, but they don't ever put it in perspective of all things that people do. Even spending too much time on your phone, you're giving energy to your device that belongs inside you. You know what I'm saying?
There you go.
Yeah, so Kyra, because you've read it most recently, I want you to describe the transition from 4 to 5.
Seamless, no.
I'm dead.
So, the way that it... Oh,
that was funny.
That's
amazing. Well, look, take a second. I'm going to chit-chat a little bit. So, part of what I remember about the end of the 4th insight, and I didn't even remember it was actually this one. I thought it was a little bit later in the book. Will, after they leave the familiar scientist guy, Will and the main character are in a restaurant, and I think they happen to see Marjorie, so he goes over to converse with her. Will's like, I'll be in the car. And then Marjorie's like, hold on, because I'm telling what I remember, because I know it's wrong. And then so Will and Marjorie is like, I want you to meet this guy. He's really impressive. He's going to take us on an expedition up the mountains, because that's where I think Will was trying to take the main character next, or like that was a road stop. So then main character goes with her, and then it turns out that he's like Captain Charisma, and the way that I pictured him in my head was Ernesto de la Cruz from fucking that's how I envisioned him.
The guy from Tarzan,
Kerchak. No, not him. What the fuck was his name? Was it Clayton? Oh boy, hold on, I actually want to look that up. Clayton.
Okay, well, I just want to do a little fact check.
Go ahead, go back.
Quick.
Tell them what actually happened.
So what happened was...
What happened?
So they were, Will and the main character was packing up to move on to their next stop. And they stopped in this little town, and he said, before they went to the town, he was like, be aware that although this place is more energy sensitive, the forest that was surrounding it in the little town, that a lot of people that you meet here are not going to be as forthcoming and basically positive. They don't have good intentions. So he said, be careful. And so they were just stopping to go get some more supplies, because it's the last stop before you go into the forest to get gas and all that. So you have to be prepared, because there ain't nothing else. And so as Will goes into the hardware / whatever store to get some more supplies, the main character is sitting in the car, and he glances over and see Marjorie walking out with another guy. They were headed towards their car. No. They were heading towards the hardware shop that Will had just went into. So he shouts out her name. They start talking. The guy is like, who is you? And she's like, it's fine. I know him. It's all good. So then Will comes out. And he was like, oh, we should all go get breakfast. And she's like, well, I got a ride and I have to go back to the camp with this guy, because she told him that she was part of the Clayton characters. Part of his mission to, research team. And so Will was like, oh, it's fine, that's only a couple miles outside of where we were gonna head anyway, so we can just drop you off after you're done. So she was like, okay, great, I know you guys, y'all good people. So then the other guy that she was with come out, and he's like, no, Clayton's gonna be worried and you shouldn't be going with them. And she's like, it's fine. And so and then main character had to jump in and be like macho man for a little bit and be like, listen to what she said.
Yeah,
because he grabbed her.
I was gonna say, part of the thing that I think was more subtle about that is that Marjorie, because she was spending so much time with Clayton guy, was giving her energy to whoever she was talking to.
Yeah. And that's why I said some people are natural just givers, because Will had pointed it out, but he pointed it out a little bit later. But anyway, so they go across the street. Will said, "Oh, I'll be there in a minute. I gotta go run and talk to some people." No, he was just trying to, wingman it.
I was gonna say,
like nudge.
Right.
And so then they go. He's like, "I'll be there in a minute." So they're talking, and she's giving him all of his attention and stuff like that. And she's telling him about the guy, about Clayton. And so then, as they're talking about Clayton, she's like saying that they're studying the insight, and the reason that she joined his team was because she was trying to escape some this conflict that she had at the Viacente, because that's where they first met, and it was uncomfortable. It was an uncomfortable situation, and he said he wanted somebody that could interpret the manuscript for him, which ended up being a lie. He just wanted her to be his pack mule and be the woman to pack the stuff for him, basically, which is what was implied, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so then they and she was like, but he won't let anybody read it. He just interprets it for us and tells us what he says. And so he's like, he's having y'all search for the manuscript and don't let y'all read the copies that he got. And wouldn't it be better? He was like, that sounds sketchy. And she was like, yes, I know. I really wish you would let us read it. And he was like, well, maybe I can talk to him. And maybe that can be how, we can figure it out. She was like, that would be great. Mm-hmm. So then Will comes back and he was like, yeah, I was supposed to join y'all for dinner, lunch, whatever. But I got something to do. So how about you take the keys and you go drop her off when you're done eating, and you just come back and pick me up in a couple hours.
Okay. Yeah, I completely forgot about all this.
So then, so he's strong, whole, wingman in it. And so then he goes, main character, they finish eating, goes to drop off Marjorie, and he meets Clayton. And that's where it comes in, where Clayton is making him feel inadequate and is still in the fear, and literally is draining him up, where he literally gets confused, like he can't think straight, can't think for himself, and he's like, what do I do? And then Will shows up, and but at first he didn't know it was Will. He recognized the car, but then because he figured like that might be Will, someone told him, go step outside. So Clayton's like, macho man, no, who told you to come outside? Go back in the house. And he was like, no, it's fine. So then he recognizes Will, and so then Clayton is trying to convince him, hey, stay. And Will's like, come on, it's time to go. They leave the trace up to him, and he's like, yeah, let's go. So then he leaves, and Will explains to him, you experienced the fourth insight, he was draining it from you. He didn't do it intentionally, but it's more than just doing like berating, like with that family. It's he was just what he picks on your weakness to make you feel inadequate, basically, and then you start pouring yourself into it.
I was gonna say, and I think Will made a point to say that this guy wasn't evil, he was just used to getting his way from people like that.
And so he was like, he really had you wrapped up, and he was like, right now it's too late to try and save Marjorie because she's too wrapped up in it right now. Like the fact that as soon as they got there, it seemed like her willpower for being her own person went down even further, because he told her to go grab something from downstairs or something like that. Maid. And she was like, oh, okay. And
just went and did it.
So,
and then at this point, wasn't the government pulling up?
Or like they pull up in this, that's in the fifth insight.
Yeah, so, no, I'm saying transitioning into the fifth, that's what happened. So
he's like, we, can move on, we'll meet her again or whatever time. He was like, no, he said that we're all headed in the same way, so maybe we'll meet up or see her when we're
in the future. Okay.
And we can probably talk to her real quick, because they had a place where they were going to, spend the night real quick before they head off. And that's what transitions into the fifth insight. So it goes to Will and the main character waking up, packing up their stuff, getting ready to go. And I think they as they are getting ready to go, because it's like super early in the morning, they see Clayton and his whole slew of people getting packed up and stuff, and they drive into town getting ready to head up. And so Will's like, hey, I see Marjorie, maybe we can go talk to her and convince her to come with us. So he was like, hey, go talk to her, I'll be waiting here real quick. So he was like, because he still had to talk to the friend that they stayed with. So then he goes over to talk to Marjorie, and just as he's like, hey, you know, about to start the conversation, military pulls up, bang, bang, shootout,
niggas are dying, bro, yeah.
They going at it, killing people. So Will and Marjorie had to split up, or Will and main character had to split up because he's on the other side of the street with Marjorie. Mm-hmm. And so they're running towards the forest to try and hide, to be safe, and trying to find a back way back around to where the Jeep is parked in front of the main character, in front of
Clayton's.
Not Clayton, Will's friend's house, the house that they slept in. Yeah. And so as they're trying to stay incognito to get to the Jeep, Will has to hop in the Jeep and just drive off because they just shooting the place up, and they knocking on people's doors doing the inspections,
looking for the manuscript pages and shit like that.
Looking for the manuscript pages,
people that have
looking for people who are foreign to their city or their village. So because they knew that they went private, right?
Because this takes place in Peru, I think. I don't know
we
if
never
said
that.
Yeah.
So then him and Marjorie have to figure it out on their own. So they're running from the cops. You know, they're making their way.
I was gonna say, not in like a funny way. Part of why this was terrifying is because they end up getting split up, and he sees a man get shot, die.
They capture Marjorie, and he sees her screaming because they did manage to escape very, very briefly and meet up with Will very, very briefly again. And they were
they saw him,
and they were about to meet back up with him, and so he's trying to call her over, but then he sees the tank, because they have tanks and stuff out. They have military guns, like military, and he was trying to like tell her like, wait a minute, stay hidden, and she's running. The military runs after her, and he sees her get grabbed up in terror. And then, but he can't do anything about it. He has no weapon, so he has to run. Mm-hmm. And then he runs into one of Clayton's other men, like a big man
with the beard, I think. Yeah.
With the beard and a gun, like a rifle type gun. Mm-hmm. This is when I say gun, I'm not talking about a little
like shooter. A little pew little pistol. We're talking like a fucking AK, bro.
Right. And so then they're running. He diffused the situation. Hey, you know who I am, because the guy was about to kill him. And he was like, oh yeah, I remember who you are. And so then the guy just starts running because they hear footsteps, or hear like the leaves crack or whatever. So then he's like, well, this guy running, so I'm about to run. Mm-hmm. And then they see the soldiers behind him, so they're ducking and all this and that. The guy, the big man, or one of Clayton's men, falls, and he obviously still runs. He goes and hides behind a boulder.
He's getting further and further up the mountain.
Right. And the guy can't get up, and he's trying to. And all he sees is just like, it's like his blood gets exploded, and the blood gets on his face. And he's just like terrified, and so he still has to run and run and run, and then he makes it up the mountain to like one of the highest peaks.
Yeah, he made it to the peak,
and he thought that was the end of it for him, because there's nowhere else to go. It's the peak.
He can see them coming up the mountain from up there,
and it's a 400-foot fall. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, so he just drops to his knees and accepts, I'm about to die. And
I'm gonna pause. Thank you for that. Okay. I want to just briefly read my little snippet of the fifth insight. Kyra did such an amazing job just then. I knew she was the one to take care of that. There was no way I was going to transition that properly. Okay, so before she gets into it, because again, she's the one with the details right now, the fifth insight is experiencing the mysticism of oneness with the universe. Plenty of modern age spiritualists preach this as the goal of enlightenment, but it is only a phase of understanding. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And okay, so back to story.
Yeah,
I talk
back
a
to
lot.
the story. She does, but it works out. It's for exactly situations like this.
Well, I hope you enjoy it. So he drops to his knees and he's like, I'm gonna die. But in that moment, he's like, what's funny is that realizing that I'm about to die, and that means that the terror is gonna be over, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just lays there and waits for death to come. But the soldiers don't go up that far.
They never see him.
They don't even see him, and they just retreat. And calmly, of course, because they think they got everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, oh, they didn't see me. The fuck's going on? And then he just starts noticing his surroundings, and he just starts like
dissolving, kind of like the edges of who he is and the edges of everything else blurred.
And he just, it's like, it's hard to explain. It's like when you're in nature. If you're a nature person, I'm a nature person. If you're in nature and you just feel at peace and calm, and you just, everything just seems so beautiful. Like you just notice everything is so vibrant. The air feels good. The air smells better.
I want to read the quote I have from page 105. I felt this euphoric connection with everything and this total kind of security and confidence. I was no longer tired.
Yeah.
And because remember, he's just booked it up an entire 400-foot mountain away from the fucking people with guns actually trying to kill him.
And that's not just 400 foot up the mountain. That's not including the stretch to get to that.
To get even to the mountain in the first place. And he's been sprinting for his life. But he feels such a genuine sense of euphoria. That fatigue is gone.
He just feels at peace. He feels calm. He feels confident. He's not scared anymore. No anxiety, nothing. He's just being. And then he says that he had so much strength that he was able to get up from his sitting position without even using his arms for leverage to push him up. I just thought that was really cool, so I had to mention that. But he starts, as he's experiencing this euphoria and this renewed sense of self, basically, he starts getting memories, basically, I think it's memories of visions of
experiences.
Not just experiences, and not just of his life, but of the universe and its creation in general. Just through the enlightenments, through just the creation he goes through, he sees flashes of the universe evolving from the stars to being an amphibian in the sea, to breathing on the land, to evolving into land animals and dinosaurs, to evolving to humans. And he just stops at humankind. He says the pinnacle.
And I want to use an example from a different book that I read that I'm also going to make Kyra read. One of the characters, he's having such a hard time, like throughout the entire book, he is just not grasping how to be. It's called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. He's not grasping how to be a peaceful warrior. So then his mentor takes him all the way up to the top of this mountain, and he's like, look, this is your last test. Either you get it or we're done here. And I'm not saying that it's like I give up on you. I mean, you might die. So then he takes them all the way up to this mountain. Then they're in a cave, but there's a cliff inside the cave. And he looks over the edge of the cliff and he feels his mentor fucking push him. He falls down and fucking dies. But here's what happened. He is his decomposing body. He goes through every single stage of decomposition to the animals and the birds eating him, his bones turning to dust. No, and it sounds gruesome saying it like that, but then he realized, I'm still here. He literally felt becoming oneness with everything. He experienced time itself because his body died, and then he woke up. And he was actually awake, meditating in the cave, basically. I thought that was so incredibly
cool.
powerful.
That sounds like some Matrix type stuff.
I was going to say, because for me, part of Kyra and I have talked about this before, but part of my biggest fear about the whole enlightenment thing was dying. I don't know.
You never talked to me.
I talked to my work friend Nicole about this, so shout out to Nicole. But I was afraid of dying, and she felt a similar fear. I was afraid that I was no longer going to be something that I recognized as me. But at the end of the day, the point of enlightenment is to experience that you are and always will be. That's it. You are the universe. You are energy. If you know, they teach you in science, energy can neither be created nor destroyed. Well, what is your body made of? What is your soul made of? It's made of the universe. You will always be. And that, to me, was a perfect explanation for something I'd read in a different book. You know what I'm saying? That was so powerful.
And I think, I just want to take a quick note to say this, and I know the reason why she never said that to me, and that goes based on the last episode that we recorded. That's another thing.
I was gonna say the last one we recorded was it wasn't grief, was it? Because I thought we were ahead. I was gonna say I thought we were ahead.
South Node. Okay.
South Node.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
My bad. We exposed ourselves a little bit. But the one that was posted a couple weeks ago for y'all now was grief. And I told Kaylyn before that one of the most heartbreaking things that had ever been said to me was my grandfather when he told me that he was afraid to die. And so that would be the reason that she never expressed that to
Honestly,
me.
no, it wasn't. It was more selfish than that. I hate admitting weakness. I really don't like to admit that there are things that I'm afraid of. And I'll even go so far as to avoid using the word fear or something like that. You know what I'm saying? And this was also, I redacted it the first time I talked about it because my parents were still listening back then. But I had a really rough year of doing psychedelics. And one of those times I felt a voice in my head say, and it felt like my own voice. Okay, no, here's what really happened. I was in my room and I was looking at everything and I was like, I can make this. I understand the atoms and how they're arranged. I could have made that. And then I went in the bathroom and I was looking at myself. I was just sitting down and I was thinking, and I felt something within me say do you want to come up? And I was like, no, I don't want to leave. And the reality was that that's not even what the actual fear was. I didn't want to die. I didn't know what the fuck was going to happen. I didn't want to, honest to God, he was a stranger to me at that time. Even though we were dating, I'd only known him because we were dating. He and his sister were the only people anywhere near me. My parents were out of state to visit Tom, who was in school out of state. I didn't want to die and be found by two strangers in my bathroom. That's so embarrassing. You know what I'm saying?
That's the only reason? Okay.
No, I mean, realistically,
no, I know,
she knows. I know. She knows. But for the audience, you know what I'm saying? I do have to qualify that. But that is the only experience I've had with anything kind of like that, and I denied it. And that's embarrassing to me. Because I'm on a spiritual journey, and I take pride in that in some aspects. So for me to have denied a potential spiritual experience because of some very earthly, very mortal shit is embarrassing. But that's also why the excerpt from The Peaceful Warrior hit me so hard. Because that was what I was afraid of. But there's no reason to be afraid of it because I'm always just going to be whatever I am. And one time, what really solidified that for me, and I never talked to Kyra about this, but one time I started smoking weed again past November. I got too high and I was like, am I going to die? Blah, 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 blah. And then I was like, you know what? If I am going to die, let me just not wake up. I don't feel like dealing with none of that. I'm not going to sit here and stress out about it. If I wake up, it is what it is. And I woke up. And ever since then, I'm going to quote my brother, I conquered my fear of death.
Yeah, your brother's weird.
He's a powerful, driven human being.
He is. Mm-hmm. I say weird in an endearing way.
Yes.
I say weird about everything.
Yeah, so well, you guys have heard him if you listen to the Kwanzaa episode.
Yes, we
hint,
will
hint.
Right. Nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
We'll get him back on here eventually.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder if I am afraid of death. I never really thought about it. Like, sitting here calmly, I'm just like, no, I do know that I was afraid. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of going to like a sad thing. I'll just say it briefly, but at one point I did contemplate suicide when I was really, really depressed some years ago. And I was too afraid to commit suicide.
Yeah, that's a very strong and I hate to say it like that, I'm not praising people, but that is still a strong decision to have to make, to take away your own life.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? That's so terrifying.
And some people say there's more strength in not doing it, but I never saw it that way, because what stopped me was being scared. So I don't see strength in that. I mean, no. I don't see strength in my decision on the reason why.
And the way you decided. No, that's fair. I understand that.
There's a big difference between that, but still, we're not
supporting that. Disclaimer: 100%.
We're not saying that you should be doing.
We're just sharing our own experiences.
So. At one point, I was afraid. I think I end up growing into not being afraid based on certain experiences that I've had.
I think you and I are at a similar spot right now where we're more afraid to die without accomplishing anything than we are just afraid to die.
Yeah, I know that, and I can say that this was solidified by, I guess, experiences of seeing my grandfather after he passed, and my dad years after he passed. He came up super late. I was mad about that, but he visited me in my dream once, right when I needed it, and that kind of solidified for me that if something happens, I'll be okay.
You'll be all right.
So
yeah, he's also watching her child for her, but we'll talk about that in a later episode.
He is.
So one of the final things I wanted to talk about this part of the fifth insight is that I heard a really long time ago, and I don't know how much truth there is in it, so please forgive me, but I heard that a Native American tradition was to send, or Native American and African actually, was to send growing boys out into the wilderness with no resources, no weapons, nothing, survive. And it could be in the dead of winter, it could be in the middle of the summer, it could be whenever. The goal is to survive for 3 days to a week, however long, I'm not quite sure. But in reflecting on that in relation to the fifth insight, what I wrote was, they're trying to send them to experience fear, because when you're dead tired, when you're afraid for your life, when you haven't eaten, when you haven't gotten proper nutrition or water, you're vulnerable. So when you find peace in that vulnerability, that's when you achieve oneness. So even people don't have to live in those kind of dire circumstances like on a day-to-day basis anymore, so I can understand forcing yourself to go through that, because people even still go through treks through the desert and shit like that. Or like the original Reiki master, Dr. Usui, he went to the top of a mountain and fasted for 3 days, and on the third day he received the Reiki attunement from the universe. That's the lore of Reiki, I fucking guess, but that's because he was in a vulnerable state, and he was already at peace because he knew what he went there to do. Even thinking about, didn't Jesus fast? You know what I'm saying? There is a certain level of trust in the universe that comes with that level of vulnerability, and that's all I'm gonna pinpoint that off with.
I wonder if there's any like real world, not real world, because all that's real world, but like more modern, I guess, experiences of vulnerability.
I really want to think about it because I honestly forgot. Kyron kind of is, she makes me feel ashamed of this unintentionally, but I forget when I write shit completely. It's gone out my head the moment I'm done writing it. Because the only reason she does it is because she remembers damn near everything that she's written down, which is because she's a word person though. So literally, I remember most things that I've seen because I place more importance on my eyes. That's super irrelevant. Just had to throw that out there. But I completely forgot that I even wrote this down. So now in seeing it, I'm like, wow, I wish I had looked up other examples. Because I'm sure people are doing it. There's this really crazy... Okay, there's two crazy people. One of them is a YouTuber whose name is Aaron. And the other one is the person that Aaron kind of studies from / worshipped, who channels a being named Bashar. We're not going to get into that. But I think... the fact that he is channeling a deity, he probably did something along the lines of modern oneness. I don't know too much about that, and honest to God, I really don't like it, but...
fair enough.
Yeah.
Moving on.
I think he stole from me also on a spiritual level, but we can talk about that personally. Okay, anyway, so then he comes down off the mountain.
Right, moving
He comes
on.
down off the mountain, and, I'm not quite sure how he got to this particular area, but he ends up at what's kind of like a monastery where there are monks.
I can tell you.
Yes.
Okay, so what happened was, is that he's like, oh, I feel confident. I'm strong in myself. I don't feel fear anymore. I don't give a fuck about anything that just happened. I don't care about the rifles. And he walks down the mountain, walks into the road, because at that point there's a road right next to the woods, and they were standing in the woods to conceal themselves. But he goes out on the road and starts walking down the middle of the road. Cause he's just that shit,
Yeah, he's just that sure of himself.
He's just that sure. He's just that confident. And so then he hears like the tanks or something coming, and then he's like, what the hell am I doing? And so then
that terror instantly comes back.
Yeah, and it doesn't come back. It doesn't tear him away from the universe completely, like that energy that he felt or that he feels, because he feels super energized, super strong.
Mm-hmm. But it definitely interrupted the euphoria.
And so he was like, okay, I got to be a little bit more smart about this, because he contemplated. He said he contemplated standing his ground or hiding, and he was like, they got guns. I can't do that. So then he goes off to the side of the road, but at this point he's too far away from the forest to go hide in that. So he has to just lay down on the ground, like in like the little grass, and just pray that they don't look over and see him, because there's nothing there to cover him. And that's kind of like what the universe protected him in, that it brought his energy to where it was still high, but it was blended in with the universe to the point where they didn't notice to look at him and see him. And he's literally hiding in plain sight. And so
I think it's fascinating you described it that way.
Oh. Is that
No, it's not a bad thing.
Okay.
You'll see what I mean.
All right. So what was I talking about? Oh, so he's hiding in plain sight. And then when he's sure that they passed, they completely, like, he literally, there's a guy that's in a tank who looks in his direction, and he can see him. Like, the main character sees this guy and thinks that this guy sees him, but he doesn't. And so then they fully pass, and when he's sure that they're farther enough down the road, he hops up, goes back into the line, like the midline of the forest, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna be a little more smart about it. And then as he's traveling, he sees this monk, because they're in the forest, there's different roads, and he sees a monk, and he's like, oh, I should go follow him and talk to him, this stranger that I don't know. Mm-hmm. And so then he tries to follow him, but he don't see him. And so then he's like, okay, should I go down this path that's towards a village, or no, going towards the valley, or should I go back towards the village where all the murderous military people are? He goes for where the murderous military people are. And then he sees them, and he's like, oh shit, gotta run back the other way, because they about to come for me. And they did run after him. And so then, but he's like, okay, well, I gotta go down this other road towards the valley, because it obviously was the universe telling him he picked the wrong road. So then he goes down the other road, and he actually runs into the monk, who's sitting in this clearing. I don't know the way they describe it, but the way that I picture it was just like this serene place. He was sitting up on a tree that was surrounded by rocks, and he was just kind of at peace, and just meditating there basically. And so then main character walks up, and the guy opens his eyes and looks at him almost as if he was waiting for him. Go ahead, you may continue.
Oh no, okay. I don't remember any of that, first of all. Second of all, the part of his interactions with the monks that really stood out for me was more with, I think, the second guy that he was able to speak to, where he was watching him eat. And the quote that I pulled from it on page 110 is, taste is the doorway. You must appreciate taste. This is the reason for prayer before eating. It's not just about being thankful, it's about making eating a holy experience so that the energy from the food can enter your body. So the reason that's even important in the first place is because he was lamenting disconnecting from the energy of oneness. He wanted that back, but he wasn't sure how to get there. Now, mind you, we're only on the 5th insight out of 9, so we're like smack in the middle. He hasn't learned that much yet, you know what I'm saying, realistically speaking. So they're trying to take the time to show him positive ways to get energy. I thought that was fascinating.
And it was so interesting because they were like, this is One thing I do want to mention that was really interesting, because when he was learning about the more so the fourth insight, kind of backtracking a little bit, and how that expels no, it wasn't fifth insight. Sorry, fifth insight. How you can feed energy into stuff, because you can use the fourth insight with the fifth to, I don't know.
I think that kind of relates more to the third, from what I remember. I could be wrong.
No. He mentioned it about her. She wasn't
like
doing it properly.
Extra energy. To
right.
Yes.
He said that she wasn't doing it properly because what happened is, I remember. Mm-hmm. So what happened was, he was trying to reconnect with oneness, and so the priest that he was talking to was like, he was speaking in broken English, so he didn't know how to exactly describe it to him. And he was like, when you experienced that experience on the mountain, what did you feel? And he said, I felt love. Mm-hmm. And so then he says, you use that because he told him to look at the tree and appreciate it, because you have to appreciate in order to receive. Mm-hmm. And so then he was like, well, how do I do that? And so then he told him about the love thing.
And here's the quote that I have for that particular chunk on page 112. You do not make yourself love, you allow love to enter you. But to do this, you must position your mind by remembering what it felt like and to try and feel it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And so what he did was the first thing that he was doing was just appreciating what it looked like, and then he started remembering like his mom and the first girl crush that he had, and he just started, it wasn't just solely focused on the tree specifically, but all kinds of love. And he was like, we often have a misconception of what love should be or what love is. Mm-hmm. It's not about giving up they had a direct word for it. I can't remember. But basically, like, giving up your self-preservation or to be a good person or your selfness. Or to gain world peace. That's not what love is. Love just is.
And the quote I have for a little bit backtrack, not to that point specifically, from 113. And I'm glad that we have a lot of the same points that stood out for us. Anyway, so the quote was, when you appreciate the beauty and uniqueness of things, you receive energy. Mm-hmm. When you get to a level where you feel love, then you can send energy back just by willing it so.
And what happened is that he unconsciously was giving energy back into the tree that was giving him energy. Now, he didn't experience it the same euphoria or at the same level that he did when he was on the mountain, because the monk explained it to him. He said that was a gift that the universe was giving to you, so like giving
how
you a little
taste,
on
the right
giving
path,
you a little taste of it.
Mm-hmm.
So then you work towards getting it yourself. Mm-hmm. And so he said you have to do it in small increments. You can't just go in and think that you're gonna get everything all at once. You have to practice. And so then that's what he started doing. And so when they were talking about the giving and receiving energy, likewise, to create this basically infinity cycle of gaining energy, he was thinking about Sarah and her research with pouring her energy into the flowers, but she was only doing it one way and not really appreciating it the way that she should have, because she was
stopped
missing
at the third
love.
insight. Exactly.
And she was missing love.
And part of why that was fascinating to me, I think they get into this more because one of my favorite insights is the 8th insight, because it tries to make sense of all the others before you move on to the last one. So she describes this, because again, it's not necessarily about giving away your selfishness, your selfhood, whatever. I don't remember what the word was either. But she describes this love transfer as the most selfish thing you can do, because you're giving so much love to the other person that they can't help but give it back. You get what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
And it's not like you're doing it necessarily with the intention of getting it back, which is what makes it, what lets you know that you're on the right path. Because for Kyra and I will just give her energy if I feel like she needs it. I have a friend, shout out to him. I'm not going to mention his name because he does watch the podcast, but shout out to him. He gives me energy without me asking to, and every so often, because I need it, I'm aware of it. You know what I'm saying? So when I am aware of it, it's like praying for people. My mom and dad used to have me when I was younger. Oh, thank you, God, for my auntie, for Rena, for blah, 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 blah. Rena's my aunt. But, you know, so and so and so and forth. Because that is a way to give them that love energy back. And now I can't say that I'm sorry. That just reminded me of another book. I'm going to let Kyra talk.
So in order for you to start to receive or to get a healthy way of receiving and giving, the
energy that you want from the universe, which is love. Yeah.
You have to be aware of love and be aware of it in the most proper way. Because again, we have a misconception of society standards of what love should be and what love is, and that's not what it is.
I was gonna say, they try to make love more of a tangible thing, more of a something that you trade with people. You know what I'm saying? When in reality, I hear a lot of people lately talking about unconditional love. That has so many deeper connotations, and at the same time, it's so deceptively simple. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've experienced, not necessarily experienced it myself, but I've definitely I think I've experienced it, but I've definitely have been made aware of it as far as like the love between my mom and my dad. They ultimately had in my mind, from what I've experienced, the ultimate
they saw
unconditional love. They saw each other's flaws and still loved each other because of
crazy, yeah, man. Like,
they were both crazy.
Yeah, no, I meant loved each other like crazy. I just didn't say the full thing.
No, that too. I mean, it was both. But they genuinely, they just had, regardless, he knew that no matter what, he was going to protect her. Same thing that went for her. They would call each other crazy all the time, cuss each other out, decide they're not going to talk to each other, but if they needed each other, they were going to be there.
My example of unconditional love is the way siblings feel for each other.
Oh, yeah.
Because for me, Kyra said that what brought her out of her unfortunate suicidal thoughts was that she was afraid. For me, I was like, what would that do to Tom? You know what I'm saying? That was the only thing. You get what I'm saying?
Oh, and I've definitely gone through that specifically with my
she's
twin.
got a lot of siblings to share that love with. You know
and
what I'm saying?
I would kill for every last one.
Every single one of them, regardless of what's going on. And not even that, I will do whatever in my power is necessary to make sure that they understand that I love them like that, you know?
And Kaylyn has actually seen me do that with my twin. We are very much not, we used to be really close when we were younger. We are very much not like that now.
At this particular point in their lives.
Right,
And we're going to affirm that that's not permanent.
Yeah, okay.
So don't disagree with me.
I didn't agree. I said okay. So we're not, close like we used to be. But when we thought that he was missing, I was like, okay, called my job, told them I had to go find my brother. She came with me, and we literally drove around to figure out where he was, calling him constantly back and forth. And I straight up told him, like, look, I don't want you to die. I love you. You're in a dangerous situation. I can't change who or what you want to be with, but I think that you should love yourself more. And I had to say that to him because I want him to know that regardless of everything, I still love you. I still think that you're doing stupid shit. And I don't condone it. But I love you.
More moments later.
All right. Okay, so backtrack to the insights. I did want to finish the quote. I didn't read the whole quote about eating because it wasn't
necessary.
It was necessary, but we had other stuff to talk about, and I think it's relevant to get back to it now. So the part I left off on is that you eat energy you eat food so that the energy from it can enter your body, but taking in food is only the first step. After personal energy is increased in this way, you become more sensitive to energy in all things, and you learn to take energy into yourself without eating. That's why it's important to learn how to connect to love.
Later that same evening.
Do you have anything that you wanted to add about these twins? Because you have read this way more recently than I have.
Honestly, once you got to the point of talking about him experiencing the love, as energy. That kind of was like the end of it, because the priest ended up coming back and then they end up leaving. There was I will say this. There was one ending piece that they had where he was starting to get a little bit untrusting of the guy, because they came back, or the priest, the main priest that he met, that led
I do have to interrupt. We didn't ever mention this before, but he meets these different priests, and almost each one of them has a different insight that they've mastered.
Yeah. And so the main priest that he met comes back, and because he went to go out of the missionary to go visit a town and figure out what's going on, because at this point, when he first came back, he was scared. He's like, the main character, he's scared, and he's like, I want to go home.
Yeah.
But they're like, may not be safe, because if the government thinks that you're a threat, they will not let you. Yeah, they're gonna kill you. So he's like, I'm gonna figure out what's going on, if I can get some information, see what's going on with your friends, because at this point he's still separated from Will, don't know what's going on with Marjorie, and or if she's alive. He doesn't know if Will escaped. And so the priest goes into town. This is when he starts, the main character has the experience with the second priest. And then when the main priest comes back, he's like, yeah, they was blowing smoke up our ass, basically saying, yeah, we just trying to protect the missionary, the manuscript, and blah, 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 just blowing steam. And he was like, yeah, we think they're lying. So he agrees to stay in the missionary until they can figure out a safe way to either get him home or figure out what's going on with his friends. And he wants to also experience more of the fifth insight, because the priest actually had a copy of it and was letting him read it. So he goes to finish reading the copy, and he goes back to the point where him and the priest first met in the forest. That's his serene spot where his energy level will be higher, and for him to actually read it. So as he's about to get started, he hears a truck pull up, the priest truck, because he was hoping it wasn't like, the government. Yeah. But he knows it's safe because he knows he hears where it's coming from. And the priest's like, hop in, it's not safe to stay here anymore. I've been made aware that they're not going to keep us, they're not going to leave us alone. So he said, I'm going to take you up to this other person that I know that I actually want you to meet, and give us a little bit more information, blah, 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 yada, yada.
Transition into 6.
No, but the most important part was that they were talking about stuff, and he's like, the main character's like, I feel like he is going to, maybe made a deal and he's going to turn me in. So he's starting to get untrusting. And he was saying that the fifth insight is more so just knowledge to get into the sixth insight. But you feed back into the fourth with it too.
Yes.
And so he says, your weakness is you cutting me off. Or he was like being aloof.
Don't go into that. Don't go into that. That is 6. That is straight up 6.
But that's how he ended it. I just wanted to say that.
But okay. Yes, but that is 6. Okay. So we can't go too far into that. I also want to say the priest who explains the sixth insight is my favorite of all the priests, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I had to add to that. Thank you so much. That's a great transition. Now we know exactly where to start off next time.
Right.
Shout out to Kyra.
Well, thank you. No.
Yeah, so I'm dead. All right. So follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I am Kaylyn was here _ on both.
And my Twitter and Instagram is Kyra _is_ here.
And then our joint Twitter, I'll do the Twitter. Kyra's gonna do the Instagram. Yay. Our joint Twitter is K _ and _ Kai.
And our Instagram is K K-A-Y period and period Kai Khai.
Yep, and both of our names are in the title of the episode, so if you don't know how to spell it, that's on you.
And my name is Kyra. I said it right this time. All right. With that being said, Kyra is here.
Kaylyn was here.
And thanks for listening.
Bye.